What's up, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. It's the football podcast. It's Week 7 ranks. I am Chris Welsh. That is Pat Fitzmaurice and Scott Pianowski in the house as we're going to be going through all of our ranks for Week 7. This is the RB Rank Show. Excited to talk to you guys and hang out. And we're going to go through all the stuff and things as we are going to hit the top board for every single player in the, as far as running backs go, for the top 12 into the 24 and even into flex as well. We're going to tell you about the Week 6 accuracy ranks. And guess what? Someone on this panel, top 25. So gotta love it. Pat, have you been traded? Are you still a part of Fantasy Pros? Everybody got traded yesterday. You would have thought it was the deadline. Are you still currently an employee with us?
I am. I was not dealt to Yahoo in a last minute deal, but no, yeah, it was a busy day and I did not wake up expecting to write 2 articles about trades and the fantasy implications, but yeah, you never know what's going to happen during an NFL season. Even a Tuesday can be exciting.
Scott, have you ever seen a team that was like, oh, we clearly just didn't get our player, pull the trigger on the other one? Like Devontae Adams got traded and the Bills are like, all right, let's go to option 2 and immediately pull the trigger on Amari Cooper. I'm not sure I've ever seen that before.
Yeah, well, the reason why Pat wasn't traded is because the receivers who were traded were, basically saved from sinking ships. Fantasy Pros is no sinking ship. You guys are storming well ahead. But Cooper and Adams just getting out of situations that are horrible, right? And normally, one reason why you don't see a lot of trades in the middle of the season is teams are worried about, well, how quickly can we onboard this player and everything. But if you're an Adams or Cooper manager, you're just glad your player, Adams was obviously politicking for a trade. I'm not sure if Cooper was being public about it, but to be traded from a team that has no chance to win, and the Browns like no chance to even move the ball, it feels like they haven't got to 20 points all year. With the Watson story, it's just absurd. They have to feel like they've just died and gone to football heaven. I mean, the Jets are 2-4, but Adams and Rodgers have so much back class together, and Cooper can immediately step to the front of a Buffalo wide receiver room where, I like Khalil Shakir for what he is, but he's not a difference maker. I mean, Cooper can be.
Well, and we'll be talking about those traded players a little bit later. Let's get into the stuff and things. First, we want to remind you guys, you have an opportunity to win some fun stuff, some free stuff. And all you got to do is make sure that you are locked in with Fantasy Pros. You can win a signed Justin Jefferson Vikings helmet for free. Who does not want that? Courtesy of our friends over at Pristine Auction. Only person might not want that is actually Pat as a Packers fan. But still, you're going to take that with Justin Jefferson. All you got to do is complete the form and then either download the Fantasy Pros Draft Wizard app, leave a review for a podcast. You can follow us on X, Twitter, Instagram at Fantasy Pros. The more stuff you do, the more entries you're going to receive. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the podcast, so make sure you're watching. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on notifications so you can be alerted when those new episodes drop and that you can claim your prize. Before we jump into the Week 7 ranks, looking back at Week 6, shout out to the top 3 in the accuracy. Remember, fantasypros.com/rankings. Every single week, 100 plus into the 200s, I think it is, of the experts around the fantasy football landscape are ranking per week. And then we are celebrating them each week. And then obviously at the end of the season, you're going to have a big overall champion. This week, Sean Corner from the Action Network was number 1, Sean Corner. Schuler Malik and Joe Bond were 2 and 3. That is your top 3 in the Week 6 accuracy rank. So we salute you guys. But little hat tip to our Fantasy Pros people. Andrew Erickson, my partner on every other show that I do here on the network, besides this one with Pat. Andrew Erickson finishing 11 this week, just missing the top 10. Mike Mayer, Pat, we got to say something nice about Mike Mayer. Mike Mayer, 13, and Pat Fitzmaurice, 22. Pat, didn't you finish 22 like in week 2? Isn't this like, I want to say this is 2 or 3 top 25 appearances on the ranks.
I don't know if I've been in the top 25 before this week.
No, you 100% have. I remember doing it. You were there. Take the credit. Say you were you were number 1.
I've had some weeks out of the top 100 too, so it's been an up and down year.
I scrolled and I scrolled and I scrolled. Took a little while to find Welsh. Have not cracked the code yet, but you know what? That's why I'm hosting this show, and I'm not the analyst on this show.
Yeah, you're very kind not to mention my rank. I will say that in my larger bathroom, which is like a library. There's a ton of books there. There's at the top of that bookshelf, there's a championship that I won for Fantasy Pros weekly ranking. It's 2011. That was a long time ago. Cam Newton isn't walking through that door. So it's time for me to maybe I'm not copying off the right sheets. I don't know what it is, but I need to step it up or you guys are going to have to go to the bullpen. You have to bring in Russell Wilson to replace me.
Yeah, well, Cam Newton's now like a media mogul. He's like the host of First Take or whatever it is now instead of the fantasy side. So you guys want to check it out. You probably maybe not necessarily care about like how we are ranking in it, but you might want to follow the most accurate rankers. And really, you might care about what the ranks look like per week. FantasyPros.com/rankings. You can see all the positional stuff, which we are going to be talking about here. They update as more rankers drop their stuff in. So, gentlemen, let's get to it. RB ranks for week 7. I'm going to give you the big board of the top 12. As such, number 1, Saquon Barkley comes in as the top RB of the week. Derrick Henry, Kyren Williams, Bijan, and Ken Walker. That is your top 5. We go down to 6 at Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Tony Pollard, Chuba Hubbard inside the top 10, Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins, and Josh Jacobs. Now, these are the big guys. You're starting everybody, though I do think it's funny, like, we're now in this space where Chuba and J.K. Dobbins are just, don't even worry about it, set it and forget it. There is one small discrepancy to talk about between both of your ranks, so we won't spend a lot of time here. And Scott, let's start with you on this. It's Alvin Kamara. Again, we're not talking about not starting, but Alvin Kamara comes in at a very strong 7 spot against the Denver Broncos this week. The Fantasy Pros matchup, though, we have a matchup rating when you go to the ranks page. It's very cool. It'll be like, here's the graded rating, projected fantasy points, their average point deviation, stuff like that. But there's also a matchup rating. Alvin Kamara is one of the 3 backs in the top 12 that has a 2-star matchup rating, which is not great. So the Denver Broncos are not like last year. It's a tougher matchup. And the whole point of this is ECR 7. You guys both just barely have him inside as an RB1. So I'm just curious about the concern. Is this built around Spencer Rattler moving the offense? What's got Kamara for you lower than consensus?
Yeah, every piece around him in this offense is in trouble. I mean, the offensive line has injuries. The 2 starting receivers probably won't play. Obviously, they're on a backup quarterback. So where is the buoyancy in this offense? How much touchdown equity does Kamara really have in this game? And is he going to get some of those dump-off passes from Rattler that he would have gotten from Derek Carr? You still would start him with this ranking, but what I would be, if I were rostering Kamara, and I didn't want to draft him before the season, that looked horribly wrong after 2 weeks. That season that we saw weeks 1 and weeks 2, it feels like 2017 to me. It's so long ago. That's the way the NFL is, where the seasons age like dog years. But I would want to get away from this offense. I would want to get away from Kamara. I think he's going to struggle. I think he's got plenty of volume. I think it's going to be like an 18 carry, 54-yard type of game for him. Tough sledding, but they have to rely on him. He's the one piece in this offense they can trust, unless you're a real big Bub Means guy. By the way, I have more Bub Means shares than I ever expected. I guess I liked him more in the fab market than everybody else. But to me, Kamara is more of a running back 2 this week.
I don't think I ranked high in the ranks because I didn't know who Bub Means was. When I saw that Bub Means had all those targets, it was 100% year 7 of your Madden franchise, and no longer half the league is not real players anymore. I was like, this is Natron Means' like alter egoed kid or something. I'd never heard of Bub Means.
I just want to throw this out here. So right before we came on, I was finishing a Yahoo article, and I was listening to music, and I was listening to The Dream Police by Cheap Trick, which is Cheap Trick doesn't have a ton of great songs, but the songs they have are fantastic. Maybe if they had a bigger catalog, Mike Damone could unload those tickets in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But you know what? After all those fab wins on Bub Means, I think I'm officially the head of the Means Police.
All right. Well, it's not the Means Police, Scott. Get out of here.
I live inside of my head.
Yeah. The funniest thing Scott said, too, to relate to this, Pat, is just like he said 18 carries for Alvin Kamara. I feel like this is going to be one of those classic 18 catches. It's just going to be nothing but dump offs from Rattler to Kamara. So like in full PPR, he's probably going to be a monster. But again, we don't need to like sit at home on this a whole bunch, especially with the Thursday side of it. But you've got Kamara, Pat. I think you are the low. No, you're 11, and Scott's got him at 12. But same thing here. Is that worry about just there's no weapons and they're not going to be able to move the ball?
Yeah, I have the same concerns Scott has. And we talked about Alvin Kamara a little bit last week with our week 6 guest, Billy Musio. And Billy, if you'll remember, had him ranked RB1 because he thought the touch outlook was elevated for Kamara with the Spencer Rattler switch at quarterback with just like he thought they might be really RB centric. And Kamara did have 21 touches. They netted 64 yards. And luckily for Kamara investors, they did get the touchdown out of him. But yeah, with a fifth round rookie quarterback starting against a good Broncos defense, throwing to backup receivers, Olave and Rashid Shaheed both hurt. It's not hard to imagine the Broncos putting 8 men in the box and just daring Spencer Rattler to beat them through the air. So that's going to make things kind of tough for Kamara. Of course, you're starting him, but I went from ranking him pretty much in the top 4 every week, and now I kind of am not too excited about it.
Yeah, and you say, of course, we're starting him, but I just want to remind, like, in that top 12, we got J.K. Dobbins and Chuba Hubbard, like, pretty locked in there. Like, those are players that could be stashed with these constructed rosters of, whatever, like a Derrick Henry and then a Kamara. And then if you have Chuba, J.K. Dobbins, there could be some decisions in there. But this is a weird situation, though, too, because this is a volume play. And volume is usually king. It's just the problem is there's only Bub Means.
I want to really quickly mention on Chuba before we pivot to the next section that I'm of the mind that he's going to be a full season factor. I know Jonathan Brooks was explosive at Texas. His window has opened up, the 21-day window. So you would think he would be on a football field soon. Panthers going nowhere. They're going to turn into an experiment soon. I don't want Bryce Young to come back because I think that could really deflate the entire offense. But Hubbard's been good every week except week 1. And week 1 was really the Bryce Young unplugs everything show, and Hubbard didn't get a lot of opportunities. I'm more bullish on Hubbard for the rest of the season than I think the market is.
I think it's an interesting one. We talked about it on the buy sell trade show. That my only caveat to that is I feel like Chuba's value is at an all-time peak. I mean, I think he was like top 5 in as far as running backs and yards go. He's being ranked as like a top 8, top 10 RB. Jonathan Brooks, I don't believe is going to come in and take away. I think Chuba is going to continue to be valuable. It's just, I don't know if he'll be the unquestioned running back moving forward, and it might just taper back a little bit. So if you're a wheeler and dealer in the trade market of fantasy football, it might be a good time to potentially look at trading Chuba Hubbard, but to trade him because you think he's going to, fade off into the night because of Jonathan Brooks, that's probably a little too premium.
I'll also say this. Yeah, I think what's going to happen if you put him to market is that the other team's going to be like, yeah, I know Brooks is going to be there. And even if you disagree on what Brooks' role is going to be, he's going to get some touches. So to me, Hubbard's going to come down as a forced hold, that you will try to trade him. The market will be like, hey, you're not pulling a fast one on me. I know the team probably changing quarterbacks at some point. I don't want them to, but they're going to have to do that. They will want Brooks to play some. So it'll be, okay, I won't try to trade Hubbard. It didn't really work out. So I'll just hope he can be an RB2 for the rest of the season, which I think he can be.
Pat, do you have Chuba ahead of Kamara this week?
I think I do. I believe I've got him one spot ahead, and I totally agree with Scott on this. Like, a lot of fantasy managers have viewed Jonathan Brooks as some sort of potential savior. I think that's a big mistake. They do have incentive to get him involved in the offense, but like, they have no incentive to give him 15 touches a week. With coming off a major injury, the team isn't going anywhere, and Chuba Hubbard has played well. Like, I just don't think Brooks is going to he'll get more work than Miles Sanders has been getting as the backup to Chuba, but I don't think he is going to put a major dent in Chuba's workload.
God, remember his ADP? Is it crazy? Remember, like, top 30 at one point? We're just, what are we doing? Like, we knew he was going to miss time, and now we're going into week 7, and he still hasn't played a game. So, interesting on Jonathan Brooks, and I am a buy.
Injury optimism has once again, steered people off track.
Well, also, Miles Sanders, like, ruining Chuba Hubbard. Putting out Miles Sanders gave us all this weird, like, well, the Panthers don't know what they're doing in the backfield, and then they just made the commitment, and it's worked out. Let's go to RB2s. This is RB 13 through 24. We're starting with the guy with the new contract, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. They're 13 and 14. Jordan Mason down at 15. Brian Robinson, Kareem Hunt, James Cook, Devon Achane at 13. James Conner, Chase Brown, Najee Harris, Tank Bigsby, and Bucky Irving. Oh, what a collection of RB2s this is. A whole lot of guys to not make you feel comfortable. Do want to put a caveat, and Pat, just confirm this with me. Jordan Mason at 15, simply due to, I think, the concerns about what his workload is going to be. Isaac Garindo is probably sitting in the wings. For you, just real quick, Mason, is he top 8 if he is just full steam ahead against the Chiefs this weekend? Or do you think you need to put this caveat in because if he plays, it might be a little bit limited?
I've got him RB10. I know our injury doc, Dr. Deepak Chona, thinks that it's a pretty good bet he plays through whatever it is, the AC joint sprain, I think. But I think maybe we see a little more Isaac Guerrero than we might otherwise.
Yeah, they haven't made that really commitment though. That's they did start to do it with Guerrero, and Guerrero looked pretty good. I mean, the zone blocking scheme, and how they can open up the line works well for the 49ers. If Mason is healthy, I do think you see a tiny bit more Guerrero, but maybe not a ton more. Scott, just really quick, same thing with you on Mason. Do you think the 15 is the contingency rank, and he goes a lot higher if he's all healthy?
Yeah, this is just life in October where there's a lot of running back injuries and a lot of our fab decisions were based on incomplete information. We're going to have to grind all week, and a lot of our starting decisions will be made after Friday practices, maybe into Sunday. I could easily have Mason 5 or 10 slots higher if the practice reports are favorable, and I could easily pull back 5 or 10 slots if they aren't favorable. But Guerrero showed enough. I think Guerrero is going to play if Mason dictates it, if his health dictates it. I think they feel good about Mason, then he'll get the usual 18 to 24 touches.
Yeah.
That's again, I know this is not a satisfying answer, but you're going to have to really grind this week with the running back position because there's just a lot going on.
I just want to reiterate that. I think if Mason is healthy, he's getting his 18 to 20 carries, but the Niners like to run 30 plus times. So you might have a little bit less of Debo in the backfield and a little bit more Guerrero. But if Mason is out for some reason, I think Guerrero almost just jumps into that same spot. I'm not sure. I don't want to keep sitting on this, I guess. But Pat, if Mason were out, would you put Guerrero just in that exact same spot as Mason, or just maybe knock him down a couple notches? Because if there's no Mason, it's going to be all probably Guerrero as well. A little bit of Taylor.
Maybe knock him down a little bit just because I don't know how elusive Isaac Guerrero is. I got to watch him at Wisconsin a little bit where he was pretty much buried behind Braylon Allen, great combination of size and speed, but he is just pretty much straight line-ish as far as what I've seen. And that was kind of his run, ran through a big hole last week and, just kind of outraced everyone down to, where he was able to intentionally take a knee late in the game. But, the only thing is the Chiefs are a tough run defense, man. They can stop the run. So this is a really difficult matchup. Even if Mason were out, I don't know if I'd have Guerrero inside the top 10, but probably the top 15.
Let's talk about this one. This is an interesting one. Najee Harris. I was kind of selly on Najee Harris. Still, I don't know. There's a little tiny bit as far as what he's going to be in this offense, but you're not seeing more of Warren. You're not seeing more of Patterson. Najee played really well last week. And then we get the craziness of Russ Wilson looks like he is going to start. And we'll have to see what that actually does for the offense. If it makes more of a threat on the passing side, maybe it opens up some more lanes. But at the same time, Fields, I think, improved that running game. Najee Harris is RB22 this week. Fitz, you've got him one spot lower. But Scott, you got him at 19. So again, this isn't love, hate, or anything like that, but you are higher than the consensus. So Scott, I'd love to get your take on Najee Harris this week, especially with the quarterback change and your level of comfort.
It's never easy to watch Najee Harris. He's like a shaky closer in fantasy baseball. You can roster him, but don't live and die with the ninth inning. You'll give yourself a heart attack. But there's going to be a lot of volume there. And he gets more goal line equity if they take Fields out, because Fields is getting a lot of those great goal line opportunities, rushing opportunities. It's a gift and a curse, right? Because Fields plays, you get wider rushing lanes. They have to defend the athleticism of Fields. Wilson isn't that player anymore. Wilson at one point was a wonderful scrambler, but that's not a arrow in his game anymore. But so Harris, you're going to get 21, 22. Why are the Steelers and Jets, by the way, why are they always on primetime? I feel like we can't get away. How can I unsubscribe from these teams sometimes? The Falcons are another team that seems to get a lot of primetime games. I don't know. I'd like to see everybody, even the bad teams. But Harris is going to get volume, and volume is king in fantasy, and he probably has more goal line equity than we want to consider. Now, granted, I could easily see them getting a pass interference call at the goal line and then Harris running into the middle of the line 3 straight times and not scoring, which Breece Hall is doing a lot of that this year as well. So maybe that's going to be the story of the game. Every Steeler game is kind of a knuckleball game. So I will approve you to play Harris as an RB2, but I'm not sure you want to watch Sunday night.
Well, and the other thing too, like your point with Fields out, it does really help the red zone equity. And that has been the thing that has taken away from Najee Harris. Up until last week, he hadn't scored a touchdown. So there was like this, positive touchdown regression. It's like he's got to score at some point. Now he looks like he would be the guy if those red zone opportunities are out there. We kind of just don't know what this Russ Wilson version of the Steelers offense is going to look like. But Pat, any takes on this? Because he's also in a group. I think it's actually kind of like some weird backs too, like the Tanks and the Bucky Irvings, who we're going to talk about in a second, and even Chase Brown is ranked really high. There's kind of this collection of running backs that there's not like an affirmative number one out of there, and then you get this guy Najee who's just getting like the bulk of carries. So it is a weird spot that he's in.
Yeah, it's funny. Najee had the Pittsburgh backfield basically to himself for a couple of weeks with Jalen Warren and Cordero Patterson hurt. Couldn't do anything. Warren comes back last week and Najee finally has a good game. But the reason I now see him as more of a shaky RB2 than a solid mid-range RB2, simply because Jalen Warren is back and Warren only played 6 fewer snaps than Najee last week.
And that makes a lot of sense. There's a debate I want to play with you guys. And these two RB2s in here. Kareem Hunt came in at 17. Devon Achane comes in at 19. I've been pretty big on buying the cheap Dolphins big playmakers just because everybody is so down on them. So I want to do a little versus Achane versus Hunt. And Pat, let's start with you. Obviously, again, Kareem Hunt is 2 spots ahead, but you are getting these, windows starting to open up as far as these other backs that are looming around. 49ers have not been great against the run. Really in the second half, the 49ers fall apart as far as their run defense goes in the second half. And the positive is the Chiefs are giving volume to Kareem Hunt. But what we know here is Devon Achane, probably of all these running backs, 13 to 24, he's 1 or 2 as far as the most talented of physical backs. We just know the Dolphins have been a disaster, but they've gone through 2 more weeks now of Huntley in the offense, the bye week, and what they're going to be able to reestablish. And Achane is coming in at a really low cost based on the version we saw 2 weeks ago. So I'd love to get your tape, Kareem Hunt versus Devon Achane this week.
Yeah, I have Achane RB17 and Hunt RB19. And Hunt does play in a far, far better offense than Achane does, at least right now, the tool-less Dolphins offense, and probably has the more certain role. Kareem Hunt does, but I think Achane is 10 times the player that Kareem Hunt is, and talent doesn't always mean a lot at the running position. Like, so it's more about opportunity sometimes. Like, on talent alone, Achane deserves to be ranked higher and maybe a lot higher than Kareem Hunt, but it's like the Clint Eastwood character in Unforgiven said, deserves got nothing to do with it. And that's like Hunt's in a great spot. So he's absolutely like a solid RB2. But man, I still want to play Devon Achane just because he can make his day on just a play or two.
Let me jump in right here. I'm sorry. Well, I'm glad that Pat mentioned Clint Eastwood because, Clint Eastwood always doubles back for a friend. And who also always doubles back for a friend? Andy Reid. When he needed help, he doubled back for Kareem Hunt. When he needed help, he doubled back for Juju Smith-Schuster. The last time we saw the Chiefs offense, 27 Kareem Hunt carries. What year are we living in? When I know, look, Achane is obviously more talented. He's younger. He can hit a home run on any play. But 100 fantasy managers out of 100 would look at these 2 backs and think, who's going to get more carries? Of course, Hunt. And it could be by a significant margin. Who's the better bet to maybe get goal line opportunity? That's also Hunt. Which offense do we feel better about? Hunt. Now, I like to see what Mike McDaniel has cooked up in the bye week, but unfortunately, they can't play Tua this week. I'm just worried this offense could be totally unplugged. So I'm just going to chase the cheap volume. I'm getting the easier volume play here, and it's an Andy Reid offense. Maybe this isn't the Chiefs that we're used to. They were an average offense last year. They still won the Super Bowl. They've been doing just enough to win every week. It's not like they're a juggernaut. I think it's a joke that Patrick Mahomes right now is the MVP favorite. He's not even fantasy startable more often than not. But to me, Kareem Hunt is actually one of the few RB2s I think you can play very confidently this week.
Time machine for 2 months ago, and you tell yourself that we're going to be debating Kareem Hunt versus Devon Achane, you would have thought we were a crazy person. It's pretty crazy at this point. This one is kind of a little bit of a heat check. Bucky Irving. Bucky Irving did get a top 24 spot in the ranks here, so it's a top 2 back. But Sean Tucker last week ended up doing his thing. They say they want to get him more volume. I guess we got to still wait on Rachaad White. 3-headed monster. They openly talked about it. That makes this scary. Scott, you've got him right around that rank. I guess I can't keep using the like, what's the level of trust with Bucky Irving? But like, I don't know, man. I love Bucky Irving here, but of any of the guys, there's a real fear of phasing out of players in the offense. Can Bucky Irving thrive as someone you can put in at RB2 or flex if Sean Tucker and Rachaad White are looming?
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the possible game script because they're playing Baltimore, and Baltimore dominates NFC opponents. And I think the reason why is they just don't see the Ravens. They see them once every 4 years. They're not used to the speed of Lamar Jackson. The Ravens have a very unusual offense that's difficult to prepare for. So if Tampa Bay would to fall behind, there's no guarantee they have to be. The spread in this game is pretty modest. But if the Buccaneers fall behind, how much is Irving involved in the passing game? So I'm thinking 15 to 18 touches feels about right. But there's also a crash landing situation. I don't know what to do with Tucker. He had a good college career, really great his sophomore year at Syracuse. The line fell apart the next year, and then when he went to the combine, they found out he had some physical concerns. He wasn't drafted, but man, he sure looked good in that game. Everybody looks good when they're producing, but he looked like a player who's good enough to play at the NFL level and good enough to handle some of the work, assuming White doesn't go. So Irving, you really need to have running back royalty to bench him this week, but there certainly are caveats with that Baltimore matchup.
Pat, you're a little bit higher on the consensus. I believe you've got him at 20, so you're pushing up a little bit more. What are your thoughts on Bucky Irving and what could be this triad of running backs?
So I'm expecting White to not play, and this ranking is based on that. And I think Tucker is kind of a straight backup. I feel so silly for fading Bucky Irving in dynasty rookie drafts because he didn't have a great combine. Like he's Kyron Williams, a guy who did not test well, but is just very good at not getting tackled. And we saw some of that last week. He had my favorite run of week 6 where Bucky Irving was running wide left, broke two or three tackles, including like stiff arming a defender to the ground, then cut back to pick up his blocks and wound up going out of bounds on the right sideline on a play that started wide left after a gain of 31. And like, it was just a spectacular run. I know the Ravens are a tough matchup for running backs, but yeah, I mean, Bucky had 16 touches with White out. I think that's kind of his baseline for week 7. I know the Ravens, they're 4th in DVOA against the run, and they've allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points to running backs. But, I just think Bucky is a pretty good bet as far as workload. And I'm really enamored with the talent.
Bucky has got the only C+ rating, matchup rating of any of this 13 through 24. If people are paying attention to that, it's a lot of B ratings. It's actually funny. 13th, David Montgomery gets an A- rating, and then we go B's across the board down to the C+ rating. So a lot about the Ravens and a lot about the question marks that are out there as far as what the Bucs are going to look like with the backfield if Sean Tucker after one game really is going to be taking over. The roller coaster of the NFL season is moving right along, my friends, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Running it in from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb, we don't care how they score touchdowns. We want to bet them. And DraftKings has heard us and is delivering. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Make your pick. We talked about Devon Achane and Kareem Hunt. Guess what? One of those players is minus money to score a touchdown, and it's Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt minus 115, or how about Devon Achane plus 160 as we're recording this. Go and check out your favorite odds of your favorite running backs to score touchdowns today. And here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5. Get 200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get 200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, RBs 25 through 36. Call them RB3s, call them flexes, whatever you want. Tyrone Tracy comes in at 25. Javonte Williams, Alexander Mattison, Austin Eckler, Zack Moss, Ty Chandler, Raheem Mostert, Jonathan Taylor, Ramondre Stevenson, Nick Chubb, Tyler Algier, and Aaron Jones. Whole lot of question marks in there. I think placeholders, if you will, for ranks and waiting for what's going to happen with the injuries. Let's start with Tyrone Tracy, though. A lot of conversation around him also on the early week shows. ECR 28. Scott, you've got him at 25. Fitz, you've got him at 30. The big question has been, when Singletary is around, has Tyrone Tracy been good enough of a back to make him fade away? And I've always said, like, Devin Singletary is not the type of guy that pushes good players away. Sometimes there are backs that do that, and it's like, let's get this other talented guy. Devin Singletary is not necessarily that player, but regardless of the point, and if he is out, Tracy has continued to make, valuable strides in fantasy as a back on that team. And Scott, you've got him as the high dog here. You've got him at 25, higher than consensus and higher than Fitz. So give us some thoughts on Tyrone Tracy as your RB25.
Yeah, it's interesting that I am the high man on Tracy, because coming to the season, I was probably the high person on Singletary, thinking, okay, he's got this history with Brian Dable back to Buffalo. He wasn't expected to be the primary back in Houston last year, but he ended up beating out Pierce and being really very fantasy useful in the second half of the season. And I think that Dable Singletary relationship has to come into play here, where it's like, okay, Tracy's too good to totally fade away. 6 catches last week. He had a wide receiver background in college. I think it's maybe, 65-35, 70-30. Maybe it percolates to 60-40 if Tracy maintains a hot hand. But we have to give Singletary that history with the coach. We have to give that some credit. I think the reason why I did come in as high as I did on Tracy this week is just Singletary's first game back. If he does make it back, maybe they don't completely go all in with his usage. Maybe they spot him a little bit and his snap share isn't, and his touch share isn't what we normally would expect. But going forward, I think it's maybe a 65-35, 70-30 in Singletary's favor, unless Tracy just blows up to the extreme that the Giants can't ignore it.
Pat, is your rank at all based around like the possibility of Singletary coming back?
It is. I'm ranking him. I'm ranking Singletary and Tracy as if Singletary is going to come back from his groin injury. I've got Singletary RB28 and Tyrone Tracy RB30. Like, I just don't think with what we've seen out of Tyrone Tracy the last 2 weeks that you can just stick him back in a Tupperware container and put him in the back of the fridge. He has been way too good. 130 yards from scrimmage against the Seahawks in week 5 and 107 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown against the Bengals last week on a night where really nothing was working for the Giants offensively except for Tyrone Tracy. Singletary, he's been productive. He's been underrated. But the Giants, they have to keep Tyrone Tracy involved with what he's shown us. Devin Singletary just does not give us the cocktail of speed and athleticism that you get with Tyrone Tracy. So they have to utilize that in this offense. I think we're going to see both guys.
These rocks ain't going to move themselves. Let's work. Those are the words of Nick Chubb, who put out an article in Players Tribune thanking Cleveland for all of his support. And it looks like he is a go for this weekend. Nick Chubb is back. What that looks like is a bigger question that everybody else is waiting the answer for. But he finally shows up in the ranks. He comes in at 34 on the ECR, which is funny because 24 hours ago, he was like 20, I think it was 27. That was an original thing we had put up on here. So people have moved him down. Fitz, you've got him at 34. Scott, you've got him at 30. Scott's a little bit higher, but Fitz, I want to start with you on your take of what we're going to get out of Nick Chubb, because there's also some Jerome Ford questions as well. People have been waiting for this. I think it's been a little bit overhyped. I don't know what the usage is going to look like, but you know what? He's a freak. He's an athletic freak, and him coming back in this way it's someone to root for. It's nice to have someone to root for in Cleveland. What is your take on starting Nick Chubb in fantasy this week?
I think everyone is rooting for Nick Chubb. I'm definitely surprised that I am lower on Nick Chubb than my good friend Scott Pianowski, who I don't know if there is anyone in the fantasy industry who likes to throw cold water in the face of injury optimism more than Scott does. And look, I realize a lot of people don't have a choice with Nick Chubb this week. They're bye weeks, they're injuries. For some people, he's coming back at just the right time, but optimally, you would have the luxury of waiting for a show me game from Nick Chubb, because for me, it's not so much concern about how good Nick Chubb is going to be. If they feel good enough to clear him, the Browns medical staff, then he must be physically fit and decent enough to play. But it is possible he is on a 15 snap pitch count. That's what scares me about playing Nick Chubb this week. just, you don't know. They might be limiting him for 1 week just to make sure he's good. And then, from week 8 on, it's wheels up. But I don't want to play him this week unless I absolutely have to.
Definitely, it's kind of a show me situation with Nick Chubb, because it really could go either way. It could be, like you're saying, minimal snaps. All of a sudden, we could be like, how did Nick Chubb get 15 carries? We don't know. And having to start that person, if you have a choice, is something you'd want to move against. Scott, you've got him a little bit more prominently in the flex spot. Do you think we could see a little bit of a higher usage than Pat is thinking?
I mean, I really echo everything Pat said. I don't want to be proactive with Chubb. I'd have to be backed into a corner. I think I'm going to slide him into the mid-30s when we finish this show. And what is he stepping into, right? I mean, Deshaun Watson's been the worst quarterback in football. The offensive line is a mess. They just traded their number one receiver. The Browns don't score. They didn't score an offensive touchdown last week. Stefanski, probably hands are tied. He can't be enjoying his job very much right now. I just feel like things have bottomed out in Cleveland. And also with the injury Chubb had, usually the rule of thumb is go get those guys their second year back. The first year back is often a rocky liftoff. So Nick Chubb, love the player. I hate the situation he's stepping into. Only if desperate would I approve him this week.
I will say, though, it's tantalizing when everybody is kind of echoing the same things about J.K. Dobbins and didn't want to draft him, and Dobbins is having the year that he's having, coming off of an injury, a serious injury. There's a little bit of that's probably floating in people's minds. A couple more just quick ones here. Alexander Mattison has actually moved a couple spots up over the last 24 hours. He was RB29 about a day ago. He's up to RB27 going up against the Rams. But both of you fine gentlemen both have him in the 30s. Scott, you were the lowest at 33. Fitz, you've got him at 31. Alexander Mattison is nothing to write home about, because at this point it's been touchdown or nothing. He has become invaluable or not valuable whatsoever if he doesn't get a touchdown. So that has to happen. And unfortunately, the Raiders. So is that kind of your take on it as well? Like, it's just a desperation play if you're putting Mattison, or is there higher optimism because he's, like I said, he's moving up in ranks for this week?
Yeah, he's almost like the poor man's Najee Harris. I mean, look at the last 2 weeks, right? 15 and 14 carries, but he doesn't have a single run over 10 yards, and he's averaging 2.5 yards per carry. Everybody's going to jump up the box against the Raiders. There's no downfield threats with Adams gone. I mean, Jacoby Myers is a nice player. I like Trey Tucker for what he is, but this team, this is a band without a lead singer or a lead guitarist. It's going to be ugly sledding. I think the Rams are actually going to win this game easily. At least Mattison was involved in the passing game a little bit the last 2 weeks. We'll see if Samir White can play, but this Raiders team, I think right now they might be the worst team in football. I know Carolina's awful, but there's things in, at least fantasy-wise in Carolina, I can look and feel pretty good about Deontay Johnson. We talked a lot about Chuba Hubbard earlier on this show. I don't know what you can feel good about other than maybe Brock Bowers in this Raiders offense. I would play Mattison only if I had to.
Is that the same thing for you, Pat? Just desperation play for RBs?
Yeah, Scott summed it up well. I mean, the Raiders offense is shipwrecked. And even though Mattison is ostensibly the lead running back, going against a defense, the Rams, like, terrible defense. They're 30th in DVOA against the run. And I still don't want to play Alexander Mattison if I can help it.
Final one here. It's a price check on the Bengals running back situation. Zack Moss and Chase Brown. You have to forgive me if I don't remember this 100%. I feel like this is the first time they've both been healthy that Chase Brown has dominantly moved over Zack Moss. I think they floated in the same range. I think there was a Zack Moss out week that Brown was ahead. But, you see Chase Brown at 21 and you see Zack Moss at 29. I don't really want any part of this backfield, as I had talked about on the buy, sell, trade show. But I know there are some definite Chase Brown loving going on here. So, Pat, let's start with you. Is this a big switch? Is this a big gap between these two? And is that how you have it? Chase Brown dominantly over Zack Moss now?
I've got Chase Brown, RB22, Zack Moss, RB29. We've definitely seen the tides shift in this backfield for sure. And, Scott, tell our mutual friend and your co-host of the Excellent Breakfast Table podcast, Michael Salfino, tell him I will be around soon to collect my Chase Brown apology.
Well, it's guaranteed Zack Moss 2 touchdowns now this week. But Scott, what say you on the Brown versus Zack Moss situation?
Yeah, I can guarantee you Mike's not going to apologize, because one thing he says is the problem with the apology is that sometimes you have to apologize for the apology. Like, I apologized to the Saints in week 3, and then around week 6, I was apologizing for my apology. So Mike is of the school of thought, like a Sopranos, never. Tony says to Ralph Cifaretto for the Ginny Sack joke, "Don't apologize, no apology." And then Ralph says, "Would it help if I gave an apology?" And Tony wants to throw the phone. I think he throws it. But here's the thing with the Bengals I thought was interesting is that Zack Moss had a fumble on Sunday night, goes to fumble jail. Chase Brown had a late fumble that squirted out of bounds, does not go to fumble jail. In fact, he went to the end zone, ripping up my Giants ticket and probably hurting a lot of people who were fading Chase Brown or needed him to not score a touchdown for their fantasy matchup. So I feel like you said, Welsh, this is the first week that maybe Brown is ahead of Moss with both of them healthy. I think that's right, but it's going to be hot hand. I think Zach Taylor, our coach, I think they succeed a lot of times in spite of Zach Taylor, not because of Zach Taylor. How does Jamar Chase rank 20th in targets when he's the most destructive wide receiver in the league at the moment? I don't get that. I think Brown has a leg up in this offense, but I think Zach Taylor, whatever he saw 5 minutes ago, is how he handles his running back situation.
RB ranks, and if you guys are looking for more, especially in the start and sit world, don't forget we've got a weekly start and sit live stream on YouTube where you can come and ask your specific start and sit questions. We'll be with you every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So for those listening on the podcast, go to youtube.com/fantasypros, subscribe and click the bell so you're notified when we are live on those live streams.